Well, our full ESPN2 coverage of the 50th Bassmaster Classic, the Academy Sports and Outdoors Bassmaster Classic, presented by Hook, is coming up on April 5th, 12th, and 19th. In anticipation of that, we have brought our colleague, the 1999 Bassmaster Classic champion, Davy Hite, into the studio, and we're going to look at that. You're going to put us in the time machine. We're going back to 1999.
Great memories, and you'll see some faces, and gosh, times have changed. The shorts were shorter, the sunglasses were much bigger, but hey, this is my favorite classic, no doubt about it.
All right, so Davey, let's set the table for your classic win here. We use the very latest at the time in mapping to take a look at our playing field there. Multiple times, the classic has been held in what's known as the Louisiana Delta. Kind of describe this place for us.
Well, it's just a huge area to fish, and everything looks great, I guess, is the first thing that comes to my mind. And the big problem with fishing a delta like that, whether it's California Delta, Louisiana Delta, everything looks great, and there are a lot of different opportunities. Whether you go north, south, east, or west, there obviously some places historically have a better reputation than others. But the hurricanes that impact this particular area so often change that from year to year. So those dynamics really, from a Bayou Black being the place you need to be one year, you have a hurricane affect that area more than some of the other. Then Venice one year, and then you have a hurricane. It's just so many things that affect which direction you should go. And the hardest part is to narrow that down and get into one good area that has some quality fish and spend your entire tournament there.
Do you and most of the anglers who had qualified, were you high on this place? Was it you think this is a good test? Or did you think, man, they're making it really hard on us?
Well, I think all the anglers love bigger bodies of water and like good fishing. Now, this is when the tournaments were in August. The classics were in the summer. You can see me sweating right there. There's like 2 inches of dry clothes on me right there. The surface temperature was in the low 90s in the morning. I remember I'd start out the surface temperature 91, 92 degrees in the morning, finish up the day at 94 degrees surface temperature.
Oh, man, and down there so humid, so humid. Huge place, 500 square miles. You basically had to pick an area, and there was no bailout. There was no going to another place. It might be 2 hours away.
Yeah, that's a good point. You had to. And the thing that was different, along with those summer tournaments, we had about 2 weeks to practice. And you needed all 2 weeks if you were going to try to beat this guy, Denny Brower. He was defending champion from 1998, a hero of mine.
Well, I'm going to put myself in an area where I'm probably going to have more time than some of the other anglers. I'm going to try to be a little more proficient time-wise. That may be a key to it. The biggest problem is going to be getting enough bites, because I'm going to fish the whole time for big fish. And if I get 5 bites, I'll probably have a chance to win the tournament if I can get that each day.
But I know where I'm fishing this tournament. I know where I'm going to win this thing. Look at the size of that bass. My goodness, that's the second big one that I've caught down through here. Look at that, man. Whew. Doggies, those are the type of fish it takes to win a tournament like the Classic.
So maybe your money was on Denny Brower, Davy Hite.
Well, like I mentioned, he's certainly a hero of mine, a great fisherman, one of the greatest of all time, no doubt about it, and had just won the Classic the year before, and I'm glad I didn't know he had caught those quality fish in practice right there.
Well, talk about that week leading up to it. I mean, this we saw the great opening to the Bassmasters. Everybody loves those bongos going crazy and everything like that. Talk about the week leading up. What was the Classic like back then that was different from now?
It was, we had, you still have a lot of events during the week of the Classic, but fewer than we had then. Every single night, one of those might be my wife.
Oh, wow. All right.
Every single night we had some dinner, some event that it was mandatory that you attend, and it was a big week, no doubt about it. There's Mickey Bruce. Gosh, I hadn't seen him in a little while.
He was a big factor in that Classic.
Big factor in that Classic. Always seemed to be. He showed up in every single Classic. But yeah, the week was phenomenal. That was the first week, I guess, that I had spent a whole entire week in New Orleans, and good food. Everybody wanted to have a good time. Unfortunately, not much sleep on those nights. You had to get up so early to go out to the launch and all that sort of stuff. So the big thing, one of the biggest things in any Classic, I think that I guess is a learning curve for you in your first few Classics. You've got to make time to get rest and sleep, because by the final day, mentally and physically, if you're not ready to compete at your highest level, you'll lose.
Yeah.
You've got to be at your best, and you can't get caught up in the moments. You've got to set a schedule and and stick to it and go to bed very early, and hope you can get good sleep.
All that heat, all that humidity, all those long boat rides and everything. This was a particularly taxing classic for everybody out the 43 anglers who would qualify.
Well, it absolutely was because of the heat, and you dehydrate, and I almost did. A lot of people, I'm sure, remember the fact that gosh, I almost really made a huge mistake by not drinking water during the day of that tournament. I mentioned earlier, I finished second in 96, and I felt like the reason I pondered on that for years, the reason I may have finished second, I got caught up in the moment and didn't focus and fish till the last minute. And George Cochran beat me in the last hour. He culled 2 fish and helped his weight a little. So I promised myself if I ever had an opportunity to be in the hunt again, I would not waste 1 second. And that's not very smart. You got to drink water when you're sweating like that.
Well, we weren't as aware of hydration back then, I don't think, as we are now. That was back when they give you salt tablets during two-a-days and stuff like that. You remember that?
I sure do. Eat more salt tablets. Don't drink water. That makes you weak.
Yeah.
That means you're weak.
Well, Mickey Bruce was a great angler. There's no doubt about that, and he kind of had it figured out here a little bit, didn't he?
He did. You notice that he's around the same looking vegetation that Denny Brower was. You see that matted hyacinths with some hydrilla mixed in. I was fishing the same thing with a little wood, and the guys that really caught him in that event, I think, figured out the combination of the vegetation, just like Mickey's describing there.
Work the canal intersections.
So they're talking about canal intersections here. Current and tidal and otherwise is important, right?
Absolutely. A lot of people don't realize, especially if you go north on the delta there, current still is a factor because of the tide influence. The closer you get to the ocean, obviously, the more of an influence it is down around Venice and that sort of thing. But it's always, when that water, especially when that water's hot, a little bit of current will trigger a feeding spree, a little time frame there where those fish will eat.
Peter T. there breaking his rod. He said it's the only fish he ever caught in competition on a broken rod.
Peter T. is a big man. I'm surprised he didn't break more rods than that because he's a big dude. I fished with him several times. Denny Brower is too. Boy, look at the crawfish going under there.
Man, they had everything back then.
Dancing crawfish.
500 square miles of Louisiana Delta, and boy, it looked like Denny Brower had picked the right place to fish.
Really did. I actually was fishing not too far from Denny. He was probably closer to me than about any other angler, but I was still about 10 miles, I guess I'm saying, 10, 12 miles a little farther up in that canal than he was. But you can certainly tell that Denny thinks he's found the area to win the Classic, and nobody would challenge Denny at that point. He's the defending champion. I think he won the first top 100 after he won the Classic, so he was on an incredible roll.
I've got a lot of confidence in that area now. It's a big stretch. It's a huge grass line. It's probably about a mile long, and there's got to be more than just them 2 bass there. And I've pretty well committed after catching those 2 to just move in there the first day, and hopefully there won't be a lot of local traffic or other competitors from the tournament there. And if for some reason I'd have most of it to myself, you never know what might happen.
Wow. Denny Brower was on an incredible roll. His whole career was great, but in the late 90s, he won the 98 Classic. The first event of the next year, he won it, and here he's found a good place for this Classic. And
he was the big dog in the world of fishing.
Oh, absolutely.
At that particular point.
He was, fishing the FLW and the Bass Trail at that point and doing very well on both of those tournament trails. I have to say, Denny Brower was one person that, he was a childhood hero of mine, and once I got to know him, he continued to be just as big a hero. I mean, he's a great guy.
The great Rick Clunn there at that point, who had already won 4 Classics, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, Rick looks different, too. We all look different. So neat to watch. It's bad to say, I guess, that in the 14 Classics I fished, I think would be similar to a lot of these anglers that have fished multiple Classics, but I only felt like going into 2 or 3 of those Classics that I had a legitimate chance to win. I mean, we all hope that we're going to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. If you're in the Classic, you've got a chance to win, but you really deep down inside, whether you've got something figured out And you've got to have something special to win a Classic, because all of these guys are good. Whether it's the 2020 Classic, the 50th one, or back in 1999 and this one, and all of them, you've got to be at the top of your game. And I knew going into that tournament that I had found an area that had the potential to win if I could just execute. And just like you heard Denny mention there, having competitors in the same area, you split those fish, and that's not what you want. Sometimes you have to deal with it. But in this event, was the first time since '96 that I had fished the Classics, but it was the first time I felt like just stay 100% focused and you can win this. And I wanted to so bad. I'd promised my son when I finished second in the '96 Classic that I would win one day. And I never forgot it, never will forget it. And this I knew was a chance. So the key for me was to stay focused. And believe it or not, the first day I did not want to be leading, because before Bassmaster Live, there were a lot of spectators that followed us in these Classics. If you go back and look from, my first Classic in '93 up through this time period, it was not uncommon to be in contention to have 50 spectator boats around you. And when you're fishing canals like a lot of these anglers were here, including myself, 50 spectator boats can just ruin everything. They're not trying to mess you up, but you put 50 boats in a canal and it can happen. So
these are small spaces, confined spaces. Yeah. Some of them even closed-ended too.
Yes,
so that makes it very, very difficult.
It does, and you have to think about all those things. And I actually left my area that first day. I knew I had 15, 16, maybe 17 pounds. I knew I would be in contention. I really and truly, it just sounds crazy, but I was hoping that I was not leading, because the area I was in, I didn't think could handle 50 boats following me in there. And it just worked out. Mickey Bruce caught them well. Jack Wade caught them well that first day.
Now, how did they decide who to cover? They only cover 3 or 4 people a day. How did they decide who to cover that first day, especially? Well, you didn't talk. You didn't let on to what you were on to.
That's when you kept your mouth shut about whether you were on them or not. That's for sure. They cover the stars of the sport, and that's another thing that, Jerry McKinnis changed this sport. We went from having 2 cameras at a Classic to having 10 or 12. Things changed, and
there you are.
There, that first day, and perfect to be in third, only about a half pound out of the lead, and they only had 2 cameras. So guess what? Day 2, I didn't have a camera with me either.
Oh my God!
Not in the boat with me all day.
I did not know that.
Yeah, did not have a camera come to me until later in the day. So everything was going as planned. But there's still a lot of competition left, and these guys are good. Jack Wade there led the first day.
Jack had 16-13, Mickey Bruce 16-10, and you were 16-9, man, right in there. And yet you still got to fly under the radar a little bit.
I did.
That had to be an important component to the victory.
I couldn't draw it up any better. Because you didn't want to be, this Classic that we just had, Hank Cherry had almost a 9-pound lead. You don't want to be that far behind, but if you take a look at that, I was 4 ounces out of the lead and right under the radar. That's what I wanted. Now, did I hope for it to be that way? Absolutely. Did I plan for it to be that way? No, I'm not that good, I promise you, to just be 4 ounces out and be third place. But I promise you, I felt to myself, the good Lord's smiling down on me. This is day 1, could not have turned out any better. Me being in third place, 4 ounces back, but not having a camera with me that second day.
So the second day, the conditions didn't change much throughout the course of the tournament, did they? It was hot and humid.
It was hot, right? And then it got hotter during the day. So you see right here, Jack Wade, it was totally the deal there. The Hyacinths with the hydrilla, flipping those edges. A lot of the guys were using black blue jigs. It's popular then, it's popular now. Mickey Bruce, one of the best with a jig in his hand. These guys are my heroes. I mean, Mickey Bruce was certainly a guy that I grew up just hoping to meet one day, let alone compete against. I will have to say this real quick about Mickey, though. After this day, I took the lead, and then I saw Mickey on the final day with about an hour to go, and I was still a few miles from check-in, and he said, what do you have? And I said, I think I got 20. And he said, what are you doing right here? And I said, what do you mean? He said, get your little tail, and that's exactly the way he put it, get your little tail to the check-in right now. You're going to win unless you don't make it a check-in. Go there right now and don't say another word to me. he was pulling for me, although he certainly had a chance early on, no doubt about it. He was in second place the first day, but Mickey's just a great guy.
What a great story. Jack Wade right there. Jack did good on FLW, did good in Bass, too. He was one of the players back in the day.
He absolutely was, and Ron Sheffield, you see there. Jack Wade, another person, just a great man, just a good person to be around, and you can't pull against Jack Wade at all. Ron Sheffield, obviously one of the big stars of the sport. I guess the key to me winning this Classic, Tommy, you have to have a good area, but these guys were flipping down in this matted stuff, and I figured out in practice, the one day right before the tournament started, these fish were suspended. I never let my bait hit the bottom.
Well, when I came in here and pre-fished, I used a lot of different plastics, and this was produced the best. This is a Gambler bacon rind, and the fish seem to, because the water quality isn't really good, the fish seem to suspend and be up high, so this swims real good. It's got better action because of the big tail.
So there was one log in an intersection of two canals that was out off the bank a little bit. And in practice, when I found this area, I caught a fish there. I fished this area 2 days in practice, or pre-practice. And I caught a fish off that log every day. It was set up perfectly. So I started there the first morning of the tournament. And I let the bait go to the bottom. I threw a buzz bait over the top. No bites. I thought the fish might be suspended, but I fished a buzz bait and I think a frog, another top water right over that log. I fished a Texas rig down on the bottom, and I ended up with this crankbait, caught my first fish. I only weighed in 2 fish of the well, that's actually a bacon rind. But I caught 2 in the tournament on a crankbait. But one of them was the very first fish, a shallow running crankbait around this log, and I was like, like a light went off in my head. These fish, they're not aggressive enough to bite top water, but they're not on the bottom. They're just under the surface, and that's what led me to swim this bacon rind.
How much did that one weigh? That had to be a 5-pounder right there.
I think it was. This was, this is the way Davy Hite likes to fish. And to be honest with you, had I been out of my comfort zone any with what I was doing, this is what I just love to do. I love to pitch and flip, whether it's a jig or soft plastics. I love to do that. But I was nervous, so nervous this tournament because I knew I had a chance to win. And had I been doing something or a technique that I didn't feel comfortable with, there was no way I would have been able to pull it off.
And we have got limited camera coverage here, but you don't see anybody else doing anything close to what you're doing. That had to be the key.
No, you see those other guys, Mickey Bruce, Jack Wade, Denny Brower, you see them fishing the exact same type of stuff, but they were punching that stuff a little more, or a lot more than me. I could not catch anything punching. I had to be swimming around this wood and this vegetation.
That's a lot. The practice day, I didn't fish. I didn't allow myself enough time to fish. I came in here late and counted 20 3 to 5 pounders floating. So when I came in here yesterday, I didn't know if there was another fish alive. Whew.
Well, Davey, what's the reason for the fish kill?
I don't know. I think, they sprayed this whole area just recently. The combination of maybe that and the real high water temperature.
So we had a fish kill back in there.
I went in there late in the one day of practice, and there were some dead fish. It may not have been 15 or 20, but it seemed like it was all of the fish in the Delta.
To a Classic hopeful, yeah, it seemed a lot.
They spray these areas a lot, and I've thought about it a million times since then, and I think they had sprayed some fish, and water gets pushed with that tide we talked about earlier. Some bad water quality gets pushed in some of these dead-end canals, and I think that kills some fish too. The deltas it'd be the greatest bass fishing. There's the one fish I caught on crankbait the final day, off of that same log, I think. But the fishery would be unbelievable if you didn't have all these bad conditions with the hurricanes and with the high water temperatures and the bad water quality coming out of some of these swamps and trapping in these areas. These these places go through routine fish kills every few years.
Oh, sure.
Every few years.
And the Delta, by definition, is a place that has to be washed out
Right.
by floods every so often, too. So you can't have it perfect all the time down
Right.
there.
If it was perfect all the time, there would be 10-pounders swimming
Oh, yeah.
everywhere, because it seems like that area right there is known for it to get really good, and then they'll have some event, whether it be a hurricane or severe drought or something that kills off a lot of the fish.
We haven't had a classic in so long down there on the Delta. You know, you got to also keep in mind that there are anglers out there, classic anglers catching redfish and flounder and everything else during the course of a day. That's Louisiana. And back, meanwhile, in the Superdome, as they say.
What a great place to weigh in. What a great place, the Superdome. And lots of bass fishing fans in that part of the country, just like all over this country.
Ron Shuffield's a guy who did the big move on that day and couldn't catch you, but he ran himself into second place, the angler from Arkansas.
Ron was another angler that I was nervous about, because he's deadly with a jig in his hand.
I know that lady right there.
There's
too.
my wife. So, Tommy, I have to say that, you know, your wife is your partner throughout life, but as a tournament angler, I mean, that's the one person that you hope you can put a smile on their face when you weigh your fish in. And she knew how much this classic meant to me. She knew that ever since we had met, this was my lifelong dream to have a chance to fish professionally. And I'll have to admit, had it not been for her encouraging me to go pursue my dream to be a professional fisherman, I would have never done it. I didn't have the courage to leave a good, secure, middle-class job and pursue that dream. But she knew that I would, I guess, never be happy if I didn't. And hats off to her. She should have been able to hold that trophy over her head just like I did.
Well, it had to be a great moment there, and the cat was out of the bag at this point. you became the hunted at that point right there.
It was, but, you know, I was just as nervous then as I was the first cast that morning and the last cast, because I just can't emphasize enough that after finishing second in 96, I just can't even describe the emotions, the drive, the commitment, and it's the best thing that ever happened to my career, finishing second in 96, because I focused like no tomorrow. Won Angler of the Year in 97, won the FLW Cup in 98, and then the Classic in 99. I wish I had been able to capture that and hold it for 20 years, but there was a stretch there where it was, I mean, I didn't watch football, I didn't watch baseball, and I was a sports fan my whole life, but my whole life was centered around getting back to the Bassmaster Classic and winning it. And I was, you know, I read every word of Bassmaster magazine, you know, paid attention to these guys, my heroes, Larry Nixon. I watched their work ethics, their demeanor, you know, I did everything I could do to get to this point. And here it is, the final morning of the Bassmaster Classic, me going out with a 5-pound lead.
So what's going through your mind right there? Again, you hadn't seen much company where you were, right?
Yep, I hoped, like all tournaments on the final day, you hope you get there and there's not, you know, it's a weekend. I think this was a Sunday morning, but there could be locals fishing. But I got there and I had it to myself. Had some spectators follow me, obviously, but they were super courteous. I had a number in my mind. I felt like I needed 11 pounds to give myself a chance. I felt like I could definitely win with 14. I had thought those numbers over and over, and catching 11 pounds meant me catching 5 fish, and that's what I put my head down to go do that final day.
Using a Gambler Florida screw lock, and it comes in black, but that's how much the teeth have scraped that up. And the hook I'm using is a 5/0 owner rigging hook, and it's just an awesome hook. And then of course the Gambler bacon rind, and I'll put a rattle in it, which I think definitely is important here with the color of water and everything. The bait is, you know, a lot of people fish jigs and a lot of people fish worm, but this bait it's kind of got a jig profile because of those front legs, and then this big tail swims, and I'm swimming this bait. And this 3/8 sinker is a little bigger than you would think you'd swim with, but they seem to like it moving fast. So, rather than fishing on the bottom, I'm swimming with a bait that's pretty heavy.
It's the same identical.
That concentration, that focus you're talking about, did you have to consciously put out of your mind those thoughts that, oh, I can only fall here. Something could go wrong. I could hit a log on the way back, and it could all fall apart on me.
All those things were going through my mind that final day. Catching 5 was, catch 5. So I've got a story about this miss here. That tree was set up perfectly, and I had not had a bite on it all week, and it was the perfect tree, the longest tree out in that canal. And I learned this years ago from a mentor of mine, I guess a local fisherman there at Lake Murray. If you've got the best piece of cover in a good area and you can't get a bite, it's because the biggest bass in the area lives there, and you've got to trick him. And an old man told me that years ago, and I had decided that after the first day of that classic, that the biggest fish in this canal is living on that tree, and I haven't been able to trick him yet. So when you saw that loss right there, it was the final day. I had fished it multiple times every day, had not had a bite. I had 4 keepers in the boat, and I get a bite on that tree. And I tell myself, this is the biggest fish in this canal. I set the hook, and it was a big one. And immediately I thought, put this fish in the boat, you win the classic. Put this fish in the boat, you win the classic. And I tried to swing a 6-pounder, and I lost the fish.
Oh. Never bit again.
Never bit again.
Did you even try again?
Oh yeah. Over? I fished it more, but I mean, that was absolutely my mental mistake because I got caught up. I mean, how could you not put this fish in the boat and you have won the Bassmaster Classic? Is what I was telling myself, and I horsed it to the boat and tried to swing it in.
We had to put that out of your mind.
I did, and like this fish, so many of these fish, I really took my time and just wear them down and put my hands in their mouth. That's what I did. But that one, it was 1,000% Davy Hite's fault. I'm glad it didn't cost me the tournament. Steve Price was with me that final day, and I'll never forget. He's soft-spoken, and he said, I think we may have rushed that one a little bit, Davy. And I said, you're exactly right, Steve.
Well, you see a lot of guys kick and raise all kind of you-know-what when they miss it. You were fairly well composed at that point. You had one little slap of your rod, and you seemed to handle it pretty well.
I always told myself, you're just wasting time making, pitching fits and breaking rods and doing. You're just wasting time. You're never going to get that fish back. The only way you can recover from it is get your line back out in the water and catch another fish.
There's some of the events going around and meet the anglers and talk to the anglers. A lot of kids, a lot of focus on kids. That was Helen Sevier was responsible for a lot of that back in the day.
It was, and we still have a lot of kids, obviously. But that was the one thing about the summer classics that I do miss, because kids were out of school and more kids got to come spend the week around the classic. And there's Helen. I mean, she was real big on that and the future of our sport and. That's just another thing, whether it's Helen or the owners now, the Anderson family. Bass has spent so much money through the years building this sport to what it is. And they didn't have to do that. But they have spent, gosh, I don't know, millions probably, sure. Building this sport in the 50 years.
And look at the Expo. The Expo looks like it does today. I mean, the products are all different. They all look sort of like throwback things, but the crowds were good back then, and they're even better today.
They really are. The fans have always been. I mean, that's what our sport is. Our sport, we have professional anglers, but our sport is fans. It is members of B.A.S.S. There's fans that make our sport.
A lot of New Orleans flavor there. And one thing I did not know until I rewatched this show again, they gave the anglers, you're sitting there with a 5-pound lead, 5-pound plus, and they gave the anglers 2 extra hours to fish on that final day. You had to be going, oh, man, come on.
Just what they need is extra time to catch me. Part of the reason, Tommy, the catches were so good that final day. It's like a lot of guys that had only caught, 10 or 11, 12 pounds earlier in the week caught 18, 19 pounds. There were multiple, good stringers. Ron Schofield was one. There was several other guys that had 17, 18, 19 pounds that final day. And, 100-degree heat.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, a lot of guys, I'd say the majority of the field was not getting, but they had to sacrifice 3 hours travel time at least, most of them, right?
Oh yeah, I don't think any one of these guys in the top 5 or so were fishing very close there to take off. So this is Larry Nixon had a big bag, I think 19 pounds that final day. And, you know, Larry is somebody you've got to pull for, but gosh, when you're competing against him, I was glad to see him in third.
I bet you were real anxious to know what this guy had when he put it on the scale. Denny Brower.
Absolutely. I had heard rumor in the parking lot that he had a big bag, and you can't ever count Denny Brower out of a tournament when he's got a flipping stick in his hand.
17 pounds. What did you think at that point right there?
Well, I smiled. I heard Dewey announce his weight, and I smiled. And all I could think about was my wife and my kids that I had told them that I would make it happen one day, and the good Lord gave me the opportunity. And there's Peyton, my youngest son. He was Natalie was 8.5 months pregnant with him when I finished second in '96, so he was able to see this one.
He was in on it. 19 pounds and 14 ounces, and you knew any of those other chasers would have to have 20 plus in order to catch it.
Yeah, just a great feeling. Just a great feeling, and you can I can still feel it, but you could see in my eyes I was just overwhelmed, no doubt. I didn't know what to say. To say I lost my biggest one when I just won a Classic, that's the stupidest thing I think I've ever said. I didn't know what else to say. I was nervous all week, I told you. But here's one thing that I want to say. I remember it just like it was yesterday. And you always dream of holding that trophy over your head. The first thing that came to my mind when I lifted that trophy over my head, looking in the crowd, and they were going nuts, it's crazy, but the first thing that came across my mind is I wish every Bass fan out there that's cheering for me could hold this trophy over their head, because it was utopia. It was like time just stopped, and I could just see the fans in slow motion, and I truly was wishing that they could all win a Bassmaster Classic. And I had never thought about that before, but it hit me when I lifted it over my head. I wanted all those fans, Bass members, to be able to experience. Obviously they couldn't, but that's what crossed my mind. It wasn't, wow, I just won 100,000, anything like that. It was, I wish everybody could experience this.
Well, Davey, I sure appreciate you sitting down, and I know sometimes people don't like to go back and watch this. They have a vision in their mind that they don't want interfered with. I think it takes a good bit of generosity on your part to sit there with all the rest of us and go through it one more time.
Thank you so much, Tommy. It's my pleasure to be here, and that was a long time ago. We get to cover the stars of the sport now, but you know, I was fortunate to be able to pursue that dream.
The 1999 Bassmaster Classic and winner, Davy Hite.